brief introduction to our two speakers today. We're thrilled to have Omer Minkara, Contact Center and Customer Experience Management Research Director at Aberdeen Group. And then, of course, our very own In-House Interactive expert, John Cray, Vice President of Product Management at In-House Interactive. In his research, Omer covers the best-in-class practices and emerging trends in the technologies and business processes used to enhance customer experience across multiple interaction channels. John has delivered contact center and communication solutions for over 20 years. He is responsible for defining and directing In-House Interactive's multi- and omni-channel contact center software services and solutions. So on that note, let's move further. Let's pass it over to you, Omer.
Great, thank you so much, Abby, and hi, folks. Once again, welcome to our webinar, and we have a great session prepared for you today. But before we dive deeper into some of our research findings around the state of omni-channel and how to get started with building a top-notch omni-channel program, why don't we take a look at what we're about to discuss, starting with the business benefits. Omni-channel pays off. It pays off big time for many businesses. And we're going to take a look at its exact business value, but here's a brief snippet around the benefits companies observe by deploying omni-channel programs. As you'll see, from a year-over-year improvement standpoint, companies with omni-channel programs are performing far better compared to their peers in terms of metrics such as company revenue growth, customer retention rates, and first contact resolution rates. So one of our objectives from today's webinar is to help you attain similar results in your omni-channel programs. That said, we also wanted to show you the answers that you have shared with us during the registration process for this webinar. If you may recall, the question was around how far along are you in your omni-channel journey? And the answers were around getting ready for it, already have a program, and we have a well-oiled machine. And as you can see on the screen, roughly about half of you have indicated that you're currently exploring omni-channel, understanding what it is, or in the process of building an omni-channel program. So the good news for a lot of you who check those boxes is that the business findings, the best practices we will show today, will help you to establish a best-in-class omni-channel capability. Roughly about a third of you have indicated that you could use some improvements for your already established omni-channel programs, and once again, the best practices that we will share today are aimed at helping you accomplish this goal. Also, roughly about 10% of you indicated that you have a well-oiled omni-channel machine. So for those of you, kudos on that. And our goal from today's webinar, specific to your needs, is to help you maintain such results.
Hey, Omer, if I could interject. Hi, everybody. This is John from ENGHOUSE. So I think what we're seeing from the survey of the attendees is about what we would expect in terms of where we are in the evolutionary process of omnichannel. I think this kind of reflects, you know, that sort of people who are early adopters at the lower end, you know, who have already gotten to the well-oiled machine state, but the majority of you are in the state where we're seeing most of the market, which is, you know, getting into the omnichannel world, starting to get systems in place, making it better over time. It's an evolutionary process. It's totally tied into unified communications, as Omer is going to point out. So I think this is pretty much what we would expect at this point.
Great observations. Thank you for those, John. And as we're setting the stage for today's webinar, another point that we would like to highlight is we'll talk about the challenges companies face when it comes to omnichannel. There's a lot of buzz around this business value, but there's not as much understanding on how do we get started with building an omnichannel program. And we see both visibility and execution among the top challenges companies face, and we'll elaborate more on both, basically understanding how to have visibility into the customer's journey, and once you have that visibility, what to do with it. That said, the very brief overview of the journey that we will all take during today's webinar is illustrated right here on the screen. We'll define what do we mean by omni-channel, especially for those of you who are exploring the term, the program. This will be beneficial. We'll take a look at its business value. But then we will share 3 steps to success. There are best-in-class companies that benefit from omni-channel programs, and we'll take a look at 3 core characteristics that define their success. And we'll be hearing several different real-life examples from John throughout this event on how your peers are utilizing omni-channel to maximize their success. And as we have shared early on, we will have a Q&A session towards the end. So if and when you have any questions, folks, please do feel free to share those with us, and we'll be answering them in the order that they come. We just mentioned that we will go through 3 key learnings. Those are the 3 best practices to build omni-channel. So before we dive deeper into those, here's a brief overview. We'll talk about how to establish a unified view of your customer's journey. We'll talk about once you have that journey, how do you orchestrate the customer conversations across multiple channels? And once you have an omni-channel program, how do you make sure that those activities are in alignment with the evolving needs of your customers? And as an overarching theme, we'll talk about quality. How do you make sure that customer conversations are high quality as you're building a unified view of the customers, but also aligning the business activities with the needs of the customers? Now, last housekeeping item of the day is that we do have a research methodology here in Aberdeen that dictates the way we capture data and the way we analyze data. We're not going to get into the specifics of the methodology. However, very briefly, what it does is it helps us understand who are the best-in-class organizations in a given space. Those are the top 20% of organizations we survey on a given topic. And we look at company performance to identify who are the best-in-class omni-channel contact centers. That helps us answer the questions right here on your screen. Questions such as what technology tools do they use? What strategies do they deploy to accomplish better results? Results that we will see in a little bit. That said, why don't we start our journey around why omni-channel, but most importantly, how to make it a part of your business. So starting with the former, why omni-channel is such a timely topic? Well, that's because multi-channel today is the new normal. It is no longer an emerging trend. It is no longer a trend. It is a reality for many businesses. According to Aberdeen's research, fully 100% of contact centers today are using at least 2 channels. In fact, an average contact center today is using 4 different channels. Therefore, multi-channel by itself is not enough to succeed. So what's the answer for success? It is about making effective use of those multiple channels, which gets into the omni-channel conversation we will have throughout this webinar. For those of you who might not be familiar with the term, omni-channel means companies using multiple channels and devices in a way where the customers are receiving consistent and personalized interactions. That means that context-aware interactions. So if I was using a smartphone, for example, to visit John's mobile application, the next time around I would use a desktop computer and visit John's website, the same look and feel of the brand would carry over from smartphone into the desktop, but also John would be delivering consistent messages through the website based on what he shared with me through the mobile application. That really is omni-channel interactions, and that's what a lot of buyers today are demanding. Another point that we'd like to make here is that omni-channel itself is helpful, but you should ask yourself, what is the end goal? What am I looking to accomplish by omni-channel? Many businesses define omni-channel as consistent messages, but are you trying to raise brand awareness? Are you trying to create customer loyalty or cross-sell or upsell? Therefore, we highly recommend you to blend journey management with omni-channel programs, and we will talk about how to do that. But really, once you blend journey management with omni-channel, then you're really maximizing your likelihood to achieve the desired outcomes. And John, I know you're having a lot of conversations around omni-channel with many different end-user organizations in the space. Would you like to share some of your perspectives around the term omni-channel and how it influences businesses?
Yeah, sure would, Omar. Thank you. So from our perspective, so we're a vendor of these communications technologies. We sell contact center management solutions and so on. Our perspective is this: we're at this inflection point where historically multi-channel, has meant, as Omer points out, has meant, giving customers a choice of communication channels. They could choose whether to communicate via email or chat or voice or whatever the choice may be. But the difference between that and omni-channel is that omni-channel blurs the choice. So a customer may, for example, pick an initial channel, like Omer mentioned, coming in through a mobile device, but during that same interaction, they may then initiate a text message, or blur that or make that into a call or video call or collaboration session in some way. Or, as Omer pointed out, maybe that happens later where they call back. Somehow you have to know it's the same customer. You have to know it's the same context. They're calling or chatting about the same issue, and you have to tie that data together so that from the customer's perspective, they don't see a disconnected interaction with the business. They see it all as one seamless thing. And it no longer matters whether they've chosen one channel or another. It's all about making the whole interaction great. And that's really what omni-channel is about.
Great. Thank you for those observations once again, John. And as we go along and talk about why omni-channel, I think it also makes sense to look at what we shared early on, that is the business benefits enjoyed by omni-channel contact centers. First of all, you'll see three different colors here. You'll see a third category that is non-multi-channel contact centers, which we call mono-channel contact centers. As we pointed earlier on, as of 2015, there is none of those companies left. If you look at the bottom here, we pulled in some findings from 2014 to really show you that using single channels is really not an option for companies anymore, because that means that companies that historically use a single channel are the ones that are with the worst performance. But if you start looking at the companies in purple versus orange or the dark red, you'll also see striking findings. Companies with omni-channel programs are seeing far greater year-over-year improvements when it comes to first contact resolution rates. A key metric from an operational perspective. From a number of customer complaints perspective, once again, those organizations are achieving about 80% greater reduction in the number of customer complaints year over year. So omni-channel really works from an operational standpoint. And what about revenue? How about financial impact? As you will see, once again, the companies in purple here are seeing about 20 to 25% greater annual improvement, which means that omni-channel is not just important to create happy customers and streamline operations, but it also helps companies drive greater revenue. So with that, is driving the results that we have seen so far as easy as flipping a switch and building an omni-channel program? Well, that is not the case, because there are a lot of different challenges companies face when it comes to building an omni-channel program. And on your screen, you're looking at the top challenges that we heard from your peers. As you will see, the top challenge when it comes to actually executing omni-channel programs is lack of integration. Integration across disparate systems such as CRM, ERP, e-commerce, and automated call distribution. Because companies are using multiple channels, it means that they're also using multiple systems. And if you're not integrating those systems, you're not going to have a single view of the customers. So when your contact center agents have fragmented views of the customer's journey, that means that they're exposed to a greater risk of delivering inconsistent messages. An additional challenge is struggling implementing new channels and technologies. As customers' needs evolve, we're going to see new technologies and new channels, things such as video and increasingly speech analytics across different verticals such as financial services are coming into play. But how adaptive is your business in making them a part of your customer care programs? For many respondents who participated in our survey, that is a challenge. And one of our objectives from today's webinar is to help you alleviate those challenges. But before we go any further on how the best-in-class organizations accomplish the results they accomplish, by overcoming those challenges. We'd also like to pass it back to John to share a little bit more insights around what are some of the challenges from his perspective that companies see resulting from disparate views of the customer data.
Thanks, Omer. Yeah, if we zero in on that top roadblock right there, that lack of integration between systems used for customer care, that's where the pain really arises. I mean, if you think about it, if you have one system that's managing the flow of your email into a contact center, another system that's managing your web interactions, still another managing voice, and so on. You know, if your social media is coming in to a different group through another system, and it goes on and on, text messages and so on and so on. Think about the cost of that. It's extremely painful. A lot of the work that we've done has been to unify that so that people really have one system to manage, one system to administer, one system to set up those business rules. You know, many times, because of omni-channel, you want the same rule to apply regardless of channel, the same group of skilled agents to handle those interactions, whether it's text-based or voice. You know, the same, make sure it gets to the right person based on the customer need. And then the other thing is this loss of context and this loss of management reporting, right? So if you don't have a single system managing all this flow, you really don't know what your agents are working on. You have to go to multiple reports and multiple data sources to figure out how an agent spent his or her day. And that is a very complex undertaking. With a single system managing all this, you get a huge amount of value from both a reporting perspective and from a customer experience perspective.
And thank you for that, John. Again, some great insights in terms of the consequences of having disparate views of the customer data. And we'll go through some of the best practices for our attendees today on how to alleviate this problem. But before we go through those best practices, I think it's critical to understand why we call them the best practices. That's because those practices simply work in helping companies achieve better results. As a lot of you might recall, earlier on, when we were talking about our research methodology we use here in Aberdeen, we mentioned that the best-in-class companies are the contact centers that have a top 20% ranking in our survey taker database. So when we look at their characteristics, we see those companies retaining more than twice as much of their clientele year over year compared to companies with poor performance, those we call the all other businesses. They're also seeing a far greater year over year improvement in metrics such as customer satisfaction rates, as well as agent utilization rates, which really shows that those companies are not just creating happy customers, but also they're making better use of their agents across multiple channels. And again, from an operational efficiency standpoint, the best-in-class are handling customer needs in a much more rapid way, and they're not having multiple interactions. Rather, they're much more likely to resolve customer issues at the first point of touch, which is really elaborated here by the year-over-year improvement in first contact resolution rates. So now we're going to start diving deeper into the characteristics, the 3 steps to success. But something that we wanted to highlight before we do that is the unique challenges faced by best-in-class versus all other businesses. As you will see in the top row here, the best-in-class company's top challenge is around execution, becoming more agile in implementing new technologies and channels. As customers' needs evolve, the best-in-class companies are trying to keep up because they have overcome the lack of integration across disparate channels. As you will see, compared to all other businesses, they are much less likely to struggle with visibility into the customer journey, which really shows that for starters, for OMNI-CHANNEL, step number 1 is creating that visibility, which is a common challenge for all other businesses. And once you have that visibility, it is all about execution, using that data. And we'll talk about both aspects as we go along the webinar. So 3 building blocks of success. And the first building block is around creating visibility around the customer's journey. So first, you like to highlight how the best-in-class organizations are creating visibility and making that available to their agents. Those companies are really understanding what systems are they using to capture data across disparate channels such as live chat, web, social media. And once they understand those systems, they start analyzing how the data flows seamlessly across those systems. If there's no seamless flow of data, those companies are working with their IT team to make sure that data flows in a seamless way, but also the contact center agents are easily able to access that data. As a side note on the importance of that, we do a lot of research here in Aberdeen on the importance of agent desktop optimization, and as part of those research, we found that an average contact center agent today needs to use 3 different screens, 3 different applications to find the right information to serve the customers, which means that about 15%, once again according to our research, about 15% of a contact center agent's time is spent looking for historical data about the customer's journey. So the best-in-class minimize that particular inefficiency by providing the right agent with the right data in a seamless way. But really, visibility should extend beyond the contact center into the other sides of the business, including sales, marketing, and back office, which is the reason why you see the best-in-class towards the right, about 50% more likely to build collaboration initiatives to align all the customer contact functions to deliver that seamless message to their customers. With that, now we're going to hear from John on how businesses, contact centers in particular, are visualizing the customer journey, which is the data point that we just talked about. John?
Thanks, Omer. Yeah, so we wanted to show you what it might look like from a user's perspective. So, if you're a contact center agent, here's a sample screen from our contact center management application. You can see there's a little bit of a film strip there in the middle of the screen that shows the agent all of the interactions that the contact center or the business has had with this particular customer. So we're seeing it's Steve Williamson in this case, and Steve has had a couple of interactions, voice interactions, where actually a voicemail got recorded in the past, and then he's got a present interaction. So I'm on the phone with Steve right now, and then he's actually got a follow-up interaction scheduled for the future. Now, what's the advantage to the agent of being able to have this complete view? Well, the advantage is that, number one, they get context, as Omer points out. Context is critical. We need to know everything the customer has done with us in the past, especially those applicable to this particular issue. So this film strip is actually searchable by characteristics like CRM issue ID and things like that, where we can actually bring up just those interactions that corresponded to this issue. But we also want to know what's coming up. And the reason for that is, if I'm an agent and I happen to be on a call or a chat or whatever it might be with this customer, I might as well solve all their problems at the same time. Think about the customer experience result of being able to say, hey, I see we're following up with you in a couple of days, and we might as well do that right now to tell you about this other issue you reported and our progress on that. Or, whatever the context might be. Or we were going to follow up with you about a new promotion or a new product that we have to offer you. I know that whole picture, and I kill multiple birds with one stone. And this journey gives you that ability. If you could complete the slide, Omer, by just clicking one more time. Also, it's actionable. So if I see that future interaction, I can reserve it for myself, take it right now, and handle both interactions at the same time. Or I can drill down into detail on past transcripts and history. I can do whatever. I have that power at my fingertips. And this ties the whole omni-channel experience together into one view.
Okay, well, once again, thank you for really helping us visualize how companies are building that visibility into the customer's journey, John. So that said, we'd also like to share some additional findings around the importance of providing such visibility in an easy fashion to the contact center agents. On the screen, you will see one of our recent findings from agent desktop optimization studies, and that finding indicates that modern agents today are using or are managing 2 digital interactions concurrently. That means that an agent might be managing a live chat session while they're also having a social media conversation with another customer. Or they might be using 2 live chat sessions at the same time. Regardless, if we go back to the other data points we mentioned, that is using 3 different screens to find applications, to find relevant data to serve customers, that means that an average agent today needs to navigate 6 different screens at the same time to resolve the customer's issues. That humanly is not possible, which is the reason why we highly recommend tying in the agent desktop in a seamless way with the other enterprise systems that capture the data to help your agents become more productive and hence create better customer experiences. To that point, we also talked about different channels that companies adopt, such as web and live chat. Yet another one of those is self-service. Self-service helps companies enable customers to help themselves. And it is great for rather easy tasks, such as a password reset. And our research shows that about a quarter of self-service interactions are resolved without the need to have live agent assist. That is great, but that also means that 3/4 of those interactions are actually escalated to a live agent. And that means that if and when a customer is routed to a contact center agent, the customer expects the agent to know about the self-service interaction history because they are not too inclined to share all the information they already shared in the self-service portal. Therefore, again, it's critical to tie in the self-service component into the agent desktop so you have a full view of the customer's journey. So, to this point, we talked about our step number 1, creating visibility and making that available to the agents. Now we're going to get into the step number 2, the second characteristic of the best-in-class organizations. And that has to do with being a master in orchestrating multiple channels. So what do we mean by that? Let's take a look at the best-in-class capabilities to elaborate a little bit more on that sentence. As you will see towards the left, companies that have greater first contact resolution rates, greater customer retention rates, and shorter average handle times, the best-in-class companies, are much more likely to determine the skills of their agents, skills being the technology skills. So in this day and age, we need to understand which agents are most likely to make typos when they're typing, or which agents have superior skills on the phone. By understanding those, we can then move into what we have towards the middle and build skills-based routing based on the agent skills. So if a customer is opening up a live chat session, chances are we don't want to connect that customer to an agent who is most likely to make typos. Therefore, really understand those agent skills goes a long way in connecting the right customer with the right agent. Towards the right, you will also see customer understanding the different channels and how they help companies resolve customer issues, and that is done with the help of analytics. What we see best-in-class companies do is they apply business intelligence tools to analyze which channels are most likely to handle certain issues. So if it's a simple password reset, do we want to put the customer through an IVR system for self-service? Or if it's a rather complex question, do we want to have a phone conversation with that customer? Once we identify the channel effectiveness for given issues, then we're in a position to route the customers towards the channels that are most likely to resolve their issues. And on that, we'd also like to highlight one of the questions that we receive very often when it comes to OMNI-CHANNEL, that is, should we use a specialist agent or should we use blended agents? For those of you who might not be familiar with the terms, a specialist agent is one who handles an interaction through a given channel. So an agent who only handles phone interactions or who only handles an email interaction, versus blended agents are agents who handle basically all channels or multiple channels. So they will be able to handle a live chat session, an email, and a phone conversation. As you will see, the companies in dark blue here, the best-in-class companies, are actually much more likely, about 60 to 70% more likely, to use specialist agents. Let me repeat that because that's the key finding, that is the top performers are more likely to use specialist agents. We have some more findings to come in a few slides, which we'll talk about how to pick between specialist versus blended agents, because specialist versus blended is not for everyone. But before we go any further, John, I know you have some insights around how companies are building multi-channel customer queue in line with skill-based routing. So would you like to share some of those with us today?
Sure. Yeah. So back to the agent user experience here. So here's a screenshot that shows a lot of data. Actually, if you could back up one, Omer, real quick. Yeah, there's a lot of data going on here on the screen. But really, one of our goals is to minimize the use of screen real estate. Omer talked about the problem of agents having to navigate through multiple screens. So it's really only that strip across the top that represents usually what the agent sees. They're seeing the interaction that they're on right now. They have some visibility into the counts of interactions across various channels that have come in. So they know the overall volume happening right now, so they can get a feel for, wow, is there just a lot of volume happening right now, or is it pretty lean and I can take my time with this customer and so on. There's charts and graphs. The key is to allow the agent to bring up the data they need when they need it. Now, what you're seeing there, and if you go to the next click here, Omer, you're seeing this blow up of this visual queue where we can see all the different channels of communication in one visual experience for the agent. Now this applies, Omer made the point that specialist agent does have a lot of value. People who are, say, trained in being able to handle a particular kind of interaction, maybe a particular kind of business interaction, or maybe a particular channel, because maybe they're better at written communications, and so we've got them assigned to do chat or email and things like that. But this gives them not only, regardless of whether they have the ability to take all these interactions, this gives them the visibility into everything that's going on. And if they can see that there are other interactions from the customer they're speaking to, or let's say they actually recognize a customer, they have a personal relationship with a specific customer, they may want to reach into queue and grab that customer right out of queue and interact with them because they have that relationship. We can route based on those rules. We can allow agents to be empowered based on those rules. And more there's evidence that the empowered and happy agent means a happy customer. An agent that feels empowered and able to make choices and, with power and desktop control actually will give the customer a better experience. So the key is to provide the tools to allow them to do that.
Great, thank you, John. And I think we also have a success story that you want to elaborate on. Would you like to share some of the highlights from the success story from Helly Hansen?
Right, will do. Helly Hansen is based in Sweden, so they're a sports clothing manufacturer, outdoor clothing, sports clothing, and so on. They've got a whole network of wholesale retailers out there in the world that are selling their clothing, and they've historically had some difficulty putting together a customer care environment for those retailers, because as you might imagine, there's quite a number of different kinds of issues you can have as a retailer, and when you're going out through a wholesale distribution channel. So they had to deal with a lot of different things. So their agents have different skill sets, and they've had to set up some fairly complex routing rules. So when they put the ENGHOUSE system in place, they were able to have a very simple, easy mechanism for, say, bringing a new agent on board. So when they do this onboarding process, they can quickly assign a first set of skills to that agent, and then when the agent becomes more experienced over time, they can add more and more skills. And that's just a simple drag and drop, where they're adding more skills to these agents and giving them the ability to more proficiently handle different kinds of interactions. They've also got self-service set up where a whole percentage of interactions into the contact center can be self-served, because the wholesalers, well, they learn how to look for the information they need or get the information online or through an IVR, and they're able to serve themselves much better. So they've actually been able to deflect a lot to agents. Omer pointed out 25% on average of calls can be, say, deflected to self-service, but actually Helly Hansen is recognizing a higher percentage than that because they've set up a pretty smart system for self-service. They're moving over time to other kinds of interactions. This is a Microsoft Skype for Business environment where Skype for Business, previously called Link, is able to handle different forms of communication like instant messaging and email through Office 365 and so on. So they're now deploying the ability to route all of those forms of communication through one common engine and handle all of that routing and self-service and all those options through one central Enghouse system. And of course the other key, and this ties right into omni-channel and customer experience, is connecting the system to their CRM and ERP data so that when the customer identifies themselves, they can quickly look up that customer in the database. They can provide self-service options specific to that customer, and they can, of course, when the interaction is routed to the agent, pop up that customer data so the agent has everything right at their fingertips. So it's all one system, and it's been crafted to really maximize omni-channel and maximize the customer's experience.
Great. Well, once again, thank you for sharing both the success story, but also couldn't agree with you more in terms of how creating happy agents results in happy customers. John, our research absolutely supports that fact as well. And that said, once again, we talked about happy agents and happy customers. So going back to the agents part, we talked about specialist agents being a trend that is deployed more widely by the best-in-class compared to other businesses. So to elaborate a little bit more on that, we've done a data cut and compared how contact centers using specialist agents. Once again, those are agents who handle interactions through one channel only versus blended agents who handle interactions across multiple channels perform. And as you will see, companies with specialist agents are actually seeing far greater performance gains, both year over year and current. You're seeing about 15 to 20% greater first contact resolution rates, but I know reducing the cost per customer contact is top of mind for many customer care organizations. And as you will see in the third row here, the specialist agents users are actually decreasing the cost per customer contact. They're also decreasing the number of transfers per contact because the customers that are interacting with a specialist agent, they're much less likely to be routed to different agents. And all those obviously play a key role in creating happy customers, where the year-over-year improvement in customer retention rates is in favor of companies with specialist agents. So what I also wanted to highlight here, folks, for you is how do you pick between specialist versus blended agents as a strategy? So we highly recommend you to go back to understand what are the skill sets of your agents. Are they actually very well skilled in handling multiple channels of interactions? If all your employees are actually very well versed in handling multi-channel interactions, maybe blended agents is the right strategy for you. But to pick between the two, you really need to understand the individual skills of your agents. So that said, we also would like to now talk a little bit about our step number 3, the third step to success, and that is aligning your activities with customer expectations. That has to do with understanding what customers have to say after they interact with the business or as they interact with your business. Are they happy or are they unhappy about the service they receive, about the agent's performance? And those insights are captured through mechanisms such as online surveys and IVR surveys. But once you gather those insights, then we highly recommend measuring the agent's performance from that standpoint. That will help you understand what agents are in need of training. What do you need to train your agents on? What areas do they need coaching on? But furthermore, it also helps you understand the inefficiencies when it comes to your processes. If it takes a long time, for example, for agents to dig the relevant content to help a customer that points that there is a process inefficiency that needs to be addressed. And as you will see on this particular slide, companies that are best in class in understanding the customer's needs and aligning the business activities accordingly are actually minimizing their customer service costs compared to companies that are not doing as well when it comes to listening to their clients. They're seeing a greater improvement when it comes to profit margins, and all those results are correlated with cross-selling and upselling, creating net new customers, but also gaining referrals from existing clients. With that, we'd also like to highlight that the activities, the 3 steps we covered so far, are not in need of manual deployment. There are technology tools that help organizations, such as the one John mentioned early on, to execute those activities. Among them are database management tools. Those tools help companies build a unified view of the customer's journey by integrating structured and unstructured forms of data. John talked about multi-channel customer queue early on, and as you will see, the best in class are about 70% more likely to have that technology in place. We talked about analytics to understand what works and what doesn't in addressing customer needs, and as you will see, the best in class are again 50% more likely to use customer analytics. Desktop analytics helps organizations monitor the agent's desktop to understand how long does it take for an agent to find the right information. How much time does an agent spend documenting notes, for example? So by using desktop analytics, you can both ensure compliance, but also maximize the agent's productivity. With that, we'll now hand it over to John, who's going to talk a little bit more about the capabilities we discussed around quality management. With that,
thanks, Omer. Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to show you one more screenshot view of what it looks like when you're really trying to provide great data to agents and supervisors. So here, if I can click here, here's an example of a screen. If I'm a contact center supervisor and I want visibility into everything that an agent has worked on, in this case we're looking at agent John Brophy, and we look at all the interactions that John had today with various customers, and in that mix over there on the right hand side I can actually see which interactions have been recorded. So I know, for example, maybe for quality purposes, we've recorded a number of John's interactions, and I can drill down to those recordings and listen to calls or look at chats or whatever it might be. Similarly, over on the right-hand side, the far right, I can actually see how John was evaluated from a quality perspective in terms of how well he handled that interaction with that customer. So as Omer's pointing out, putting all these pieces together is what's key to maximizing omni-channel. It's about multi-channel and blurring of lines between channels, sure, and it's about moving the data with the interaction with the customer so that I've got that context. But it's also about all this information, providing all this information and maximizing quality of all these interactions every step of the way, and that's absolutely key. Here we see the ability to hover over an interaction and literally play it right from the UI where I can see the scores and so on. What's interesting about interaction management is, in the omni-channel world, it's no longer about one thing. It's more about a customer's whole journey, as Omer's been pointing out. Maybe the customer initially came in through a website or a mobile app. They decided they needed live help, so they initiated a chat with a live agent. While on that chat, they decided, well, you know what, I really want to talk to somebody. I prefer the voice call, so it moved from chat to call. Then now I'm talking to an agent. Maybe I'm also exchanging data with that agent, through email or through sending an attachment in a chat or whatever it might be. That agent is able to resolve my problem, and then I get sent to a survey, potentially, where I can actually, in real time, respond with a customer satisfaction survey. Sorry, I'm having trouble bringing the slide up here. Sorry about that. I'm trying to complete the cycle. But then from that survey, I can go in potentially to a proactive follow-up. So maybe the contact center makes the decision that the best way to give you the best service possible is to follow up after the fact. Make sure you were happy with the previous interaction and offer you more services on top of that. And it loops back to then, okay, now I have another transaction I need assistance on, and so on and so on, and the cycle continues. So the amazing thing about OMNI-CHANNEL is it no longer matters that I track each of these things separately and I optimize each thing and I worry about each. It now becomes one continuous experience for the customer, and it all blurs together into one continuous flow. So in terms of the major takeaways from our perspective, and we'll go back to Omer in a second for his perspective, we've got to make sure that the agents have access to the channels. If they're a specialist agent, if they handle one form of communication, say they're only handling email or something like that, then it's important that they still are trained on how to handle the different kinds of business interactions, that they have access to common responses through a response library, that it's tied back to the customer's data. But it's key that they have this blurred line view and this very well-crafted single desktop interface to allow them to manage all the channels that belong to them. They've got to be able to keep that context. As the customer moves across channels, as the customer goes through that life cycle we saw with that continuous experience, everyone that customer deals with needs to be informed on what's happened all the way along the way. If the customer originally came in through a mobile device and they were looking on a mobile website and then they ask for a contact with the contact center, how many of us are able to say, these are the screens on the website the customer looked at before they went to the agent? That's tough, but if we tie it together into one continuous experience, that's not out of reach. The agent can actually see all of that context. And then, of course, mobility is key, right? So the customer might choose to come in through desktop now. They might be on a mobile device. They might be on traditional telephony from the office. We know all of their information. We can look it up in a database, but depending on what information we've gathered in a form or from caller ID or from an email from address, whatever it is, we have all that key information for that customer. And then self-service, as Omer pointed out. There's high value and high ROI from offering good self-service, and today's customer wants self-service. They want to be able to find the information themselves. They're more and more empowered to go on the internet and look things up than they ever were. So we can't assume that they want to talk to somebody. Many times they prefer not to. They want to get the information themselves. And more we're going to see self-service as a key way of differentiating customer service.
Great, Dave. Once again, thank you for sharing the takeaways, but also the real-life use cases, John. And from our perspective, we wanted to highlight the key learnings that we have went through today, the 3 secrets to success when it comes to making omni-channel happen and maximize the benefits. What we've learned is that the best-in-class contact centers, the ones that enjoy better first contact resolution rates, better customer retention rates, they first create visibility into the entire customer journey. They understand the historical interactions with the clients, and once they do, then they become masters in orchestrating the customer interactions across multiple channels. They determine the right skills for agents, and they use that information to connect the right agent with the right customer. But also, they leverage technology tools such as analytics and customer feedback management to understand the customer sentiment and feedback, to also really determine how omni-channel programs influence the customer sentiment so they can implement new channels, they can adjust the business processes to meet the customer needs. And those are all facilitated with a focus on high-quality customer interactions. With that, I know we received a whole bunch of questions throughout the webinar. So with that, we'll go through the Q&A session. And again, a quick reminder, if and when you have any questions, folks, please feel free to utilize the Q&A function on the panel, and we'll be answering the questions in the order that they come.
Yes, we did receive a few questions. If you have any questions, we're still accepting them, so feel free to type them in using the GoToWebinar interface. First of all, Omer, I know you did actually specifically address this, but we did get a question asking more specifically about the building blocks for OMNI-CHANNEL. You mentioned systems integration as one of the building blocks for OMNI-CHANNEL. How should we get started with this activity?
Sure. And that's definitely a question that we get asked often. What we highly recommend is to first map which channels you're using as a business to interact with your customers. Are you using live chat, phone, social media, and what systems are you using to capture data through those channels? Once you have an understanding of the systems, then we recommend working with the IT team as the experts in data management to see if the data flows seamlessly across those systems. That is, are you able to take a holistic look into the customer's journey that you gathered, through which you gather data across multiple channels? If your answer is no, then it is time, once again, to work with the IT team to integrate those disparate systems by using technology tools such as database management. And once that integration is in place, then we also highly recommend that you build a unified agent desktop. What unified agent desktop does is it helps contact center agents easily access the data across different enterprise systems through a single screen within the agent desktop. And that really maximizes the agent's productivity and performance. So that's really the journey that we recommend companies to take. And if there's any ROI expectations that our attendees are expected to provide internally, then we recommend sharing some of the findings that we presented today in terms of how companies with omni-channel programs are actually growing their revenue and reducing their costs.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question we got in, what kind of data should we collect and provide our agents to help them ensure consistency in messages?
So Omer, you okay if I take this one? So we see this a lot, right? And that's a very, very common question. I think there's the couple of ones that seem to rise to the top are CRM data. So depending on the kind of customer communication environment you have, like if you're customer service, for example, it's typical, very typical, to tie issue tracking to contact center interactions, where it's a seamless experience for the agent to be able to, pop up a screen. We know who the customer is. We pop up the screen. If it's a new issue, they're ready to go to enter that issue right into CRM. If it's an existing issue they're asking for status on, we pop up that screen so the agent can literally not even one click away, 0 clicks away, have access to the information they're conveying to the customer. And that's true regardless of channel, of course, because we're able to identify the customer based on different keys. The key for our typical implementation is there's one source of truth for each kind of data. So you might have CRM being the source of truth for customer issues, customer contact information, and so on. And you have the interaction management system be the source of truth for the actual interactions, the history of those interactions, when they occurred, how long they were, who was involved from an agent perspective, and the transcripts and an actual content of those interactions. So you've got those two things. So you've got two different systems managing customer data. How do you tie them together? You create a unified key, and based on that key and some kind of customer ID, you tie the information together. And then it just becomes a matter of making sure that you keep that information consistent through every communication and every step of the journey. The views that we saw earlier in the presentation are really just representations of what we were just talking about. They're just representations of that data tied together in one view.
Okay, thank you, John. And we have one more question, and it looks like it's perfect on timing. Okay, so we're currently in the process of deciding between specialist versus blended agents. How should we evaluate the two options?
Sure, and I can take that one. And once again, a really good question. I think that's something that we sort of elaborated on, but let's expand on really the decision-making process between specialist versus blended agents. I think the business case for specialist agents is one where you're able to provide an extremely focused service to your customers because the agents that are serving each and every customer are a subject matter expert in their area. Versus with blended agents, you're connecting an agent with a customer, but in that case, an agent might either be a subject matter expert or they might not be. If that is the latter case, then you're risking creating an unhappy customer. So what we highly recommend is really taking a look at your existing products and services. How sophisticated are they? What are the different types of service requests you're receiving? If in general you're receiving rather simple service requests and your agents are rather well capable in handling multiple channels, then I think a blended agent strategy is the right strategy for you. But if you have a complex series of requests that are coming through different channels, and if not every agent is skilled in handling every channel, which is really what we find to be the most common case across contact centers, then we recommend using specialist agents. And the way we recommend going about it is by adjusting the routing activities so we can understand which agent is a specialist for which channel, what are the subject matter skills of given agent, so we can connect the right customer through the right agent for the right channel and for the right issue. But it really all starts with understanding the agent's individual skills with use of technology such as competency skills assessments. And over time, agent skills will change. So something that we'd like to highlight is that make sure that you track your agent skills over time. If they become skilled in, let's say, handling social media interactions over the past year, then let's make sure to adjust that so that we can put the agent within a queue that handles the social media interactions as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, those are all of the questions we have for now. So if we could go over to the next slide. So if you have any additional questions later, please email them to John Gardner. So it's up here on this slide. That's John Gardner, john.gardner@enghouse.com, and he will follow up with you personally. Thank you again for joining us, Omer and John. We really appreciate your expertise.